Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 8th International Congress of Genç Ekonomistler. I'm Yasin Tosun from Üniversiteit Siegen, and I will be moderating these sessions on the last day of the Congress. Our guest speaker in this session will be Assistant Professor Cavit Görkem Destan from the TED University, Turkey. They will be presenting his article, Learning with State-Dependent Preferences. I'd like to briefly provide some information about the sessions. In these sessions, we will ask to our guests 10 questions and learn about the main points of the article. Each question will have a 100 seconds response time. After the questions are finished, we will ask our guests any questions you may have. All of this one, and now we begin. Welcome, Professor, again.
Hi again, thanks for the invitation, and it's a nice opportunity to talk again about my paper from years ago, actually, and still interesting, I guess, to talk.
Okay, if you're okay, we will start off the first questions.
Sure.
Okay. The first question is: Does the study build a new theoretical framework beyond Hagag and Pope and Gagnon, Barsh, Bouchon, or it's mainly replication of the existing models?
Actually, that's the starting point of the whole study, whole project. These two models were actually answering how do we learn about the quality of the good when our enjoyment, our utility from this good depends on the environmental factors or our internal factors like the weather, like the who are we together consuming it with, etc. So these two models predict two different learning outcomes in the long run. One says you will, like, if you try some good over and over again, you can learn. And the other paper says, like, if you try it over and over again, you basically diverge from the true quality. And we wanted to test these two implications by having this dynamic approach. So we want our subjects to try it twice. And in the end, we realized that Gagnon, Barsh, and Bouchon is actually had the true prediction, and Hagag and Pope is falsified with our data. But also we add one more channel of attention, and we realize that people learn only if they pay enough attention to these factors, which is not present in Gagnon, Barsh, and Bouchon's paper. So it tests these two models, but it also adds an additional factor of attention on top of this Gagnon, Barsh, and Bouchon paper. So it's not the one-to-one replication, but we add this dynamic approach to understanding learning pattern and also add another factor.
Okay, time is perfect. So the second question is: how do findings integrate with learning and memory-based models? The second part in this question is: does a new theory or an empirical validation of the existing ones?
That's also a really nice clarification, because this attention factor has been studied by other papers, of course. But for instance, this model by Bordalo, Genaioli, Schleifer is a very general model. It says, like, you can retrieve some of your memories depending on some of the states, and you can form a belief, etc. It can explain many behaviors, but we are mostly interested in the state-dependent utilities where there is a specific quality of the good and a specific state that you consume it with. So although this Bordalo, Genaioli, Schleifer or other attention models can explain this type of behavior, they are usually too general to, like, what is a cue, what type of memories are retrieved, what is the comparison to previous experiences, and so on. So this study of with fruit juice actually tells a little bit more specification about this channel, about this attention and learning models. So it is somewhere in between this Bouchon and Gagnon-Bartsch paper and Bordalogy and Ayala Schleifer paper. One was too specific, did not have this attention channel in it. And Bordalogy and Ayala Schleifer have so many channels of memory and cues and perception. So our result specifies this Bordalogy and Ayala Schleifer and other attention models, like which type of factors are getting more attention, what is the exact updating process, and so on. So it is like a specification of a general model usually.
Okay. The third question, right. Is the two-stage drinking experiment with the WHTP measure strong enough to capture biases, or would multi-product or larger design yield higher externality validity?
So actually, this was a bit of a risky thing in our experiment because, as I said, in the usual experiments, subjects try it only once, and when they try it in a good state, they like the good more. They try it in a bad state, they like it less. And we say that they attribute this good or bad state to the quality of the good, so they are affected. And we just increase this trial, this experience to two stages. Like the subjects try it twice, 1 week apart, try a fruit juice. And actually, this fruit juice study was got the inspiration from Hagag and Pop. They tried it once, and we just wanted to try it twice to see. We could have seen no result, maybe, but interestingly, maybe like people learn only after 5 or 6 trials. But interestingly, even with 2 trials, people in different stages, in different states, they converge to each other. They learn the true quality, even with 2 stages. So, yes, in the beginning, it was a bit risky. Maybe it was too short, but the results suggest that even 2 stages is long enough to understand the effect of the state. So we were lucky, and it's actually a very good thing. Even in 2 trials, people can understand the true quality. It's like a hopeful result for this learning literature, actually.
Okay, the next question is, okay, this is the fourth question of the sessions. How were salience and attention quantitatively measured or controlled? The second part is, does reliance on the subjective survey data limit the generalizability of the findings?
Actually, at the beginning, we were not so much focused on attention or salience. Like, we thought it might be a factor, but in the original models of Hagag and Pop and Bouchon and Gagnon-Bartsch, there was no mention of attention or salience. So they were just looking at the observables and the prediction on learning. So we add one maybe lucky trick that people write a short sentence, a short text box about their experiences when after they tried the fruit juice. So our aim for that was to make them a little bit think about the fruit juice so that they pay attention to their experience. And then we can look at what they wrote there. And actually, no one mentioned the drinking water beforehand. That was our state variable, like we changed their thirst level. No one mentioned the thirst level. No one mentioned that, oh, I do this because of that water treatment. So actually, we can see what they pay more attention to from their explanation only. Of course, you might try to incentivize that as well, but it is really hard. Like, maybe some eye tracking and even MRI methods can be used, but drinking fruit juice is such an internal experience that it is really hard to measure outside of this narrative or text box measurements.
with 168 participants, and is the dataset large enough to distinguish between the Hagag and Pope and Gagnon-Barsh and the Bouchon models?
So yes, everyone likes a larger subject
Yes,
pool, larger data set. And this was a second risk, actually. Like maybe we couldn't get the differences in between two groups, treatment and the control group. But again, luckily, maybe in the first measurement, like in the first week, in the first measurement, we see a huge difference between people who drink low amounts of water and high amounts of water. So it was large enough to see this difference statistically significantly and quite well. And at the last measurement in our treatment, it's the fourth measurement, there is no difference, and it is not statistically significant. And whenever there is this null result, you might think, oh, maybe your data set was too small to capture that. But even the difference in magnitude was just 2 cents. So even if, like in a large data set, we find that like it is statistically significant, economically it doesn't make a huge difference. And even this 2 cents was in the wrong direction. Like then Hagag and Pope said like it would be positive 2 cents, but we found negative 2 cents. So maybe it was a luck, but I think economically, like even if you can find the significant small difference, it doesn't mean much. And again, luckily, our data set was large enough to confirm our results.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a large data set. It's not considered compulsory things after this analysis, right?
Right, exactly. And also the data is so small, we don't have too many variables, we don't have too complicated econometric methods. So yeah, it was more than enough, I guess.
Okay. The sixth question is, are the salient versus non-salient factor results theoretically grounded in psychology, or do they remain observational correlations within attention to economics?
Actually, this is like you can trace it back to the very, very first days of behavioral economics. Like Amos Tversky, who was the amazing co-author of Daniel Kahneman, he first started to study perception and how do people understand like the differences in two objects, like the two colors of an object, like two shades of a color, or two lengths, or two temperatures of two objects, etc. And they slowly switched to how do people perceive probabilities, risks, and numbers and values, things like that. So more economic objects. But even in the first days, they try to understand like what do they pay more attention, like this anchoring bias or availability bias. You can all find the fundamentals in psychology. And also attribution bias, which we talk here, is a very common finding in psychology. They usually use it in interpersonal relations, like how do I evaluate a person in front of me, not a consumption object, but the other people and their actions, their intentions, and things like that. So this salience and attention has been discussed in psychology for a long time, and only in the last decade or so economists started to pay more attention to that. Of course, there are correlational studies, but there are also lab studies that show the specific measurements. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Next question. Do WFTP measures reflect through behavioral preferences, or might sensitivity to short-term emotions bias the measurement of learning dynamics?
That's a very common problem in lab experiments. You usually show one thing and you are curious whether you can apply it directly to the real life settings. And of course, usually you cannot just take it at face value and apply it directly. This study is more like a proof of concept. So it shows the mechanism. I wouldn't say that if they are willing to pay 40 cents to this fruit juice in the lab, they are willing to pay the same amount in a supermarket, because as the paper suggests, in the supermarket there will be different environment, different external factors, and they might affect your willingness to pay. That's the whole idea. But this results actually show us like where should we look at? Like maybe some factors are more obvious than the others, and people can understand the effect of these obvious factors. But if some factors are not that obvious, or like if they don't try the good at least a few times, they can have biased evaluations. So the mechanism can be applied, the idea, the main insight can be applied, but of course these willingness to pay measures in the lab is just for that moment. And actually, we also have non-incentivized slider, like how much do you like the juice? And it correlates almost one-to-one with the willingness to pay measure. So it reflects their emotions at that moment only.
Okay. Last three questions. And on what assumptions are lab-based result generalized to micro-level policies like the right of withdrawal, and have these assumptions been empirical tested?
So the model we derive, like the Gagnon-Bash and Bouchon's paper, and also the attention factor, has a few assumptions, a few critical assumptions. First of all, you should be able to observe your own utility. Like when you consume something, you should be able to tell how much do you like it in general. So maybe this is not always true. Maybe you cannot understand it. Like, I don't know, some health products, you can understand it, maybe the effects maybe much later. So this is one crucial assumption, which is true in some settings and not in the others. The other assumption is you should be able to observe the state so that you can understand the effect of the state. And this effect, observing the state, is not always possible too, especially some hidden states like, I don't know, your health condition can affect your enjoyment, but maybe you don't pay that much attention to that, or maybe you cannot even observe it at all. And the third one is maybe a more interesting one. You should be able to compare things and make a kind of comparison and calculation. So is it good? Is it bad? Is it better than what I expected? And you should be able to update your beliefs. And this is not easy to do. Like, we used university subjects in our experiments, and they were quite brilliant students. So they did that comparison, but of course, it's not always possible. And now there's a huge literature on complexity. And we know that these types of complex calculations are not always possible to do.
Okay, last two questions. Can the persistent learning effects observed in the lab realistically hold under real-world uncertainty? And how can external validity be tested? So these questions is the discussion part of these articles. Yes. So a little bit is different and a little bit hardly. Please don't understand that this and other participants. This is just the discussion section.
Sure. Yes, it's a bit like beyond the scope of our paper, because we only tried it twice and we don't know what happens if people try it in a longer period of time, or can we have the same effect after many, many times. But there is one study, again by Hagag and Pope, on US Military Academy, and they see that like university students, when they take one course throughout the semester, if they don't like that course, this like also affect their future course choices, future career choices, and so on and so forth. So this one semester treatment is longer than our 2 weeks. A semester is usually 14 weeks. Yeah. And when they observe that state for 14 weeks, even months later, years later, they have this memory of, I don't know, a terrible course, so they don't like that discipline at all. So we see this long-term effect. But even in those studies, you have the same treatment for 14 weeks. What would be interesting is to switch it. Like in the first half of the semester, maybe you have one professor. In the second half, you have another professor. Or maybe, I don't know any study that looks at that specifically, but some companies switch from working at offices or working at home. So this office versus home switch can be a kind of a, I don't know, pseudo experiment to understand the effect of like whether people like their job more or less in a good state or a bad state, or they can understand better.
Okay. Last questions. How can rejecting the Hagag and Pope and the supporting Gagnong bars and the Bushong be integrated into bound rationality, expectations, and the attention-based models?
So, as I said in the first questions, like they don't specifically have attention in their models. So that's one addition. Like we should have attention as a main channel because that was one of the biggest findings in the paper. But also in more general papers, we are a bit skeptic about like what is our reference, what do we pay attention to, etc. And in this study, we really see quite a nice picture of people pay attention to the water they drink. Like we made them drink half a liter of water. So they pay attention to it. It's quite obvious to drink half a liter of water. Some people even had a hard time finishing the water. But they don't pay attention to their own thirst level when they arrive to the lab. Like we measured that. We asked them at the beginning, like, how thirsty are you at the beginning of the session? But we see that it still affects their willingness to pay measured at the end of the experiment. So it really gives us a hint about like we usually pay more attention to the outside world, outside factors, external factors, but we don't look that much inside of us. Like we don't think about like how hungry I am right now. Like small kids, sometimes they cry and they got naughty because they are hungry, but they don't realize that they are hungry. And when we grow up, we try to pay a bit more attention to these factors, but still we don't look into us that much as we look at the outside world. So actually in psychology literature, in this fundamental attribution error, which I mentioned about this interpersonal evaluations, psychologists realize that like when we look at the other people, we realize that they are affected by many things. But when we evaluate ourselves, we mostly ignore some internal factors. That's one key finding in psychology, and maybe we can incorporate it into our attention-based models so we can make a distinction between internal factors and external factors.
Okay. And all of the questions is finished now. So thank you for answering all of the questions. And yes, today on the first day after the Congress, so today it's the last day, but the first session of this in this last day, these sessions. So we were with Assistant Professor Cavit Görkem Destan from the TED University. We reviewed the article "Learning with State Department Preferences" with him using 10 questions. Thank you again for your participations and the contributions, professors. And if you want to say anything, your turn.
So thanks a lot for the opportunity to clarify the questions. Actually made me think even more about the findings. So if anyone has any more questions, I'm always happy. You can find me online. And good luck in the Congress. It's a great work. You're doing a great job. And I thank for the opportunity again.
Thank you again. So that concludes these sessions. Until next time, stay tuned.